despite some early on technical difficulties, we are here live for another edition of Let It Rip. Guys, a couple of things before we kicked into our jam-packed episode this morning. Um, there are a couple of pieces around where you are watching live that I would like to point out. The first one is the comment section. Go ahead and chime in. Let us know where you are, where you're tuning in from this morning. Say good morning, all of those fun things. Secondly is the share button. Go ahead, share. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because we're live every week, same time, same place. I think that's about it for me. So without further ado, to get into today's festivities, I want to turn the wheel over to the host with the most, Pastor TC. Good morning, man.
Good morning. How's it going? Everyone got 40s in their cup. Yes. Yes. The response always wanted. So yes. Good morning, everyone. We are talking about classism this morning. And I hope you strapped up a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to be talking about it. Is it present in the church? We know it's a present foot in our world, but is it present in our church? And you know how we usually do now. You haven't got the routine by now. If you have a cut on, we ask you to participate, but we also define what we're talking about before we talk about it being present in the church. So what I'm going to do is we're going to define classism. Then we're going to just go right into it. Is it present? Does it exist in our churches? Because such a thing exists in our beautiful churches where we lift our hands of worship, where we glorify God. And such a thing exists. Let's go ahead. And by the way, we're glad to have Tierra back with us again. She's been rocking us with this whole social justice theme that we've been going with for a couple of episodes now. And we have one more. This is a little spoiled, but we ain't gonna tell you what it is. But she's been with us, and we appreciate you so much for being present with us as we are going on this endeavor to educate people, as well as kind of redefine some things spiritually, I feel like, as well as biblically, and of course, just having practical wisdom. So we appreciate you, ma'am. Not to put you on the spot, but while you are, I'll give you all your beautiful accolades. Why don't you go ahead and define classism? So the beautiful people can understand what the term is, just in case there might be some confusion on the word.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you for the warm welcome and the acknowledgments. I will accept those. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So classism is one of our isms, right? I think in social justice, we talk about how a lot of different elements of social justice target various isms, right? And we've talked about racism. There's other like sexism, heterosexism, right? Ableism. We've talked about ableism. We've talked about sizeism. And so now we're talking about classism. Classism is specifically a differential treatment or prejudice, discrimination, just like some of these others, that is based on socioeconomic class status. So how you perceive someone's class. So essentially, like whether you think someone looks poor or is wealthy, right? The way that we kind of translate those different things to also being indicators of a person's value, right? We'll say, oh, you're worth more because you make more, right? Or you're worth less because you make less, right? These different kinds of things. Or you are lazy, you are dumb, you make less, right? All of these kinds of assumptions based on an individual's socioeconomic status. So it operates in that way of kind of like interpersonal way, also as like socially how we see things and television and media too, right? Like it teaches us how to view people of different classes, and kind of filters our lens that way. But it also, again, like sizeism, like ableism, is also a systemic issue, right? And so it is tied to the oppression of groups who are from lower class, and is a part of perpetuating this disadvantage that they have through like kind of creating all kinds of barriers for individuals who've come from lower class backgrounds to access the same opportunities that the wealthy do. Like classic examples are education, right? So differences in ability, like private school versus public school, right? They have different types of people, largely because of different levels of access due to their class status. And so it is dealing with all of these different things, right? The oppression and exclusion of lower social groups, but also the kind of systematic assignment of certain value judgments based on one's socioeconomic status.
Man, that is a lot. Before we get into that and unpack that team a bit more, good morning, Alex. He says blessings, Apostle, and all the beautiful Sure Foundation family. Good morning, sir. Good to have you. Let us know what you think about this topic so far. Feel free to chime in. Do not be shy. Okay. Oh man, so you said a lot in that, and when you were talking, I'm just like, man, this could flow into different things. Just even could flow into gender a teeny bit, and it could go anywhere. We're talking about the church. And I'm even thinking biblically, right? I'm thinking about examples in James where it talks about how there's partiality to someone being treated at a dinner table, how they have the rich in a certain place and they have the poor in a certain place. And James really comes down on such behavior. And so it is a theme that I think has existed for a very, very long time, it's safe to say, and still going on. And what's crazy about that, we see that saying quote unquote, in the Bible and in the church, because we're Christians read the Bible. I would say everyone reads the Bible, but the Bible, I think, we read it as Christians to understand and grow with God. And so you even see that in the Bible is already telling you, indicator that this is a possibility, how we go about treating people. And so now the big question I had, now we have to find this thing. I gave a couple examples. Let's talk about our personal experience. Being treated this way concerning classism. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is one of the I'm excited to learn about, because I feel like it's one of those ones that are very hidden underneath the radar, and I have a lot of questions for it because I'm starting to understand what it looks like now. And I'm like, oh dang, this has always been happening to me. And so it's one of those epiphanies that are happening as I was unpacking this a couple days ago, because little spoiler for you guys. She's done a couple social workshops class, and she was gracious to share some of her slides. So as I was reading this, I was like, well, this has kind of been my life in a weird way. I just didn't have a word for what was happening to me or happening to others. And so that was very interesting. So let's talk about personal experience, how we personally all have these disadvantages. And I am going to go ahead and open the can of worm to a little bit of gender in here, because I feel like it even happens with gender, especially, there's disadvantages that women have and there's disadvantages that men have, even concerning social class. And as you were talking, I was like, yeah, I mean, all my life they were telling me as a man I gotta make more to be this, and if I don't make this, then I'm this. If I'm not making this at this age, then I'm this. Even how we, like you said, we view people, that messed me up. This person looks like they make this much money. In reality, they make a lot of the money, but the way they look doesn't match what they make. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things I'm just like, it's gonna be a hard one to kind of pinpoint where we're gonna flow. So I just thought we'll start our experience, and I'm pretty sure we'll get, like Joe says, a little rowdy from there, find some madness in our experiences, because it is a broad spectrum. And that's what I loved about this. The more I studied, I was like, oh, this is more broad than I thought. It's kind of like ableism last week. I was like, was bigger than I thought. Okay, so enough of that. Let's see, how am I going to start this off? I'm gonna start off with the man with the beautiful beard on top. Start off with
They both have beautiful beard. Which one?
Don't they do got beautiful beards. You're right. Let me clarify. The one
Joe's
with
beard is becoming famous.
yeah,
Somebody,
the infamous. He has
somebody
an
on one of my
infamous beard.
streams, somebody on one of my streams says, "Is his beard blue or is that the camera?"
Famous, man.
Yeah, so I'm glad. I want to start off by saying, T, I'm glad that you brought up what you did as far as I like to say, there's nothing new under the sun. I say that tongue in cheek. That's biblical. That this is something that, yes, is easy to talk about in the modern context, especially when you get into conversations centering around things like politics, say certain political leanings, different things like that. And sure, there's room in the conversation for all of that, but you bring up the point that this is something that mankind has struggled with in the past. And I think that that's really a vital thing to raise out of this, especially when you start to get into this section of talking about this, where each one of us could highlight a variety of examples. And I personally come with not only my examples, but literally the whole reason why my wife was basically run out of an entire ministry because she wasn't part of the same the socioeconomic class. It was just the whole culture. Just she was ostracized because she wasn't making X amount. Soccer mom, 2.5 kids, the whole 9 yards. So just acknowledging that this can take so many different forms, and like you said, and Tiara did you did such a great job of setting the table about the whole thing, because you have to acknowledge the variety of on ramps to this topic. Man, I would say, unlike a lot of the others, like, yeah, sure, this is some things ring true in other topics, but this is one that's I, for my money, specifically difficult to work through. But yeah, this is the for me, I come to this from a weird spot because I am a business owner, because I have seen the change in people's eyes when they hear that I'm a business owner, like, oh, you're doing the dream. You're a real man, because I know what that's like when you're nothing but a lowly line cook, or you're not a real career as a chef, which blows my mind that some people think that way. And all of that kind of stuff. So when working your way through this, it to me, I get a chance now at this stage of my life to be able to be so aware of how prevalent it is on this side of the country, that to me, part of it's almost become closer to the surface whenever I walk into a new church. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. We tracking. That's
So good.
So that's all good.
I'm just, like I said, this conversation could flow into so many different ways, and I'm not, because even touches what we talked about weeks ago concerning the homeless.
Yeah.
It touches a lot. And so yeah, Joe, thank you. Possum, come to you real quick, and then T, then I'll be you, and then we'll go from there, because this is gonna be one of those ones where I'm really interested. Chat, if you first off, I need you to wake up a little bit, okay? Because this one, I believe, is more interactive than what people are anticipating. Because what I'm hearing, this exceeds even race a teeny bit. Actually, I'm not gonna say a teeny bit. It does exceed race. I think a lot of times, we can detach because we think. Well, see, even that's the thing. Like, white people make more money than black people, automatically. And I'm not gonna say that's not privilege in there, but there's a lot of things we do to automatically just categorize ourselves to separate things. It's just crazy. Like even Joe, I was vibing with Joe because I was like, yeah, I got that. Mine's is the opposite experience of being an entrepreneur. He's like, oh, you want to be an entrepreneur? Yeah, you're wasting your time. you know, you must, especially when I tell them why I do. I remember when I was working at Uber. Oh man, no one just ever considered that a real job. Like you're not making money. Even though I ain't gonna get to the statistics of how much Uber drivers potentially make, and how if you have like any sense of a business mind, which you can actually take away, but I won't get into that. But yeah, even stuff like that is just like, man, it's interesting. And yes. But Pastor, go ahead. I'll let you go ahead and go. And then we got some good morning comments. Good morning. How you doing, Gary? Gary team, Miss Hutchins, how are you? Good morning, y'all. Just chimed in, so I just want to catch up. You cool? We vibing, we chilling. Because I have a feeling that this is about to turn to a fire. So I hope you bought something with you because
Yeah.
we're about to take off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting subject because there's a lot of ways, like you said, that this could go. And so I guess I'll go from um, the church uh, leadership or organizational perspective that a lot of times, you know, people's issues with titles is because they turn titles into classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the upper echelon, so if somebody has the title of apostle or prophet, that seems so much higher than evangelist, pastor, or teacher, or deacon. And so they make it into a hierarchy instead of positions like in, and again, I'm a sports guy, like in football.
Ooh.
you know, people put a lot of weight on the quarterback, but the quarterback can't complete a pass unless the offensive linemen block, right? And if the offensive linemen don't do their job, then running backs, receivers, nobody gets to do anything, right? And so everybody, is supposed to have their weight in who they are. But we find that if somebody walks in with a certain or specific title, then they are classed above other people. And so being around a lot of leadership and being in a lot of rooms with, quote unquote important people, you start to see the classism arise. And so even within those contexts, okay, how many members are in your congregation? How big is your building? Where is your building? Are you in Silicon Valley, or are you in the corner of the hood somewhere? And there is that perception of classism that it just depends on where you're functioning. You will run into it. And then in that same vein, education. So what seminary did you go to? What, where did you study? All these kind of things kind of fall into that particular area, and you feel the pressure of that. You feel, the eyes looking at you. You feel the disdain or the approval or what have you in that particular arena. Paul specifically says that we do not class ourselves or compare ourselves with ourselves, because that's foolish. But yet we do that today very seamlessly. It's an easy thing to go and do, to begin to class, even people in leadership in the church.
I'm gonna have to touch that later. You done something right there. So I'm go ahead and let T go. Now hold yourself together, Joe.
Yes.
Because
Look, I just have a lot to say. That's all.
I felt him. I was about to say that. Like I just want to go, but
There was a deep breath on that
Hey, I just had to go there. Everybody was bringing their perspective, and so I had to bring that in.
That makes sense.
I was going to
Church
poke at
leaders.
that bear, and I was like, "Do I poke at that bear?" And then he just said it, so I'm like, "All right, we want to go there." Yes, T.
Yeah. No, like everyone has said, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I think for me, the two that come up the most prevalent, right, is I think that like a church's location is often tied to like the kind of individuals that they hope to bring in, right? And so you can often see that like churches will pick specific locations and usually middle class or upper to middle class neighborhoods if they have a specific demographic that they're trying to reach, right? These tend to be like, usually prosperity gospel types or like individuals who have a certain image, like, and also different denominations. Actually, when I was doing the research for this last night, it was kind of crazy to see that like specific denominations of Christianity are known to have higher incomes than others. Like Episcopalian, like is like the third ranked like highest income category, right? It's like behind Hinduism and Jews, right? Is Episcopalian. So it's like interesting to think about how like different denominations, because also of like the way that they use the gospel or teach the gospel, I mean, propose certain types of work ethic, right? So I think that's something to think about too. Is like, oh, the way that we use what we learn in church and church as a space to encourage people to pursue like middle class goals, right? I think this comes up quite a lot with like giving in churches, and the way that like certain people who give enough will get different incentives. Like there is a church that some family members went to and no longer go to, but they would like basically identify the top 10% of their givers, and they would get access to going on mission trips and things like that first, and all of these other different things that actually highlighted the distinctions very explicitly between different classes and like who's able to give and how much, which is problematic in and of itself, right? Like now you're pitting congregation against each other to see who can give the most. But then a lot of preachers today are very much like will come in and try and use the Bible to justify like hustle, right? And it becomes about like, promoting this kind of capitalistic work ethic instead of actually talking about what scripture says. And it'll be like, God gave you these skills, right? And these skills are like for you to turn right. Your ministry should then help your money, right? Like all of these different types of things. And you're like, what? Like, is this what we're here for? So I think that's a big one. I think the other one for me that I've encountered quite a bit is dealing with kind of the personal side of it. Like when we have individuals who are unhoused visit the church, or who maybe don't have like stable homes, right? A lot of members will complain about how they smell or how they look, or like not want to sit by them because of their appearance. These are also dealing with classism. So like that's because you're making a value judgment. Like I don't want to be around them, or they shouldn't be in the front because we don't want that to be what our image is as a church.
Oh my.
So there's a lot of different ways that this comes up, right? Yeah.
Well,
I think these are the biggest ones for me off the top of the dome.
You start something. See what the Wilsons did this one. Talk about y'all both this one and look what they've done. Okay, so since we're going there, I was trying to ease onto the thing. Yes.
You gotta rip it off.
Let it rip. Here we go. I almost want to rock paper scissors Joe, but I was fucking about to jump in this thing. I see him. I could just feel
leaned in. He's like,
he's like, listen, yes. I felt bad thinking this way, but I'm going to say it. I've experienced classism and even capitalism more in the church than I experienced probably outside of the church. And I was just trying to identify what that looked like. And I was like, how do I put this into words without bashing, but being honest about my experience? Yes, leadership, since I've been a Christian, has always been this fight to get to the top, to someone like a pastor. And it never made sense to me why we can never just approach the pastor. Like the pastor was like gold or something. Like you could not get to this dude. And if you did, like you gotta have your P's and Q's together. You know, so I didn't know nothing about what we call fivefold ministry or anything like that. At the time growing up, I just knew there were special people in the church that were just special. I didn't know how they were special. I didn't know what it was, but I just know you can approach them any type of way, and these people held power.
Sit in the front.
Right. Yeah,
In the
no,
pews.
seriously, I think I sound because I'm one of those one that me and my wife are one that we do sit in the front of our church, and even that there's actually something behind that. It's because for me, when I'm blind, I should be probably wearing my glasses. I probably could sit anywhere, but I don't know. It's just I sit in the front to see clearer. That's number one. Two, it just feels good to have that freedom to sit in the front. And that was before I was a pastor. I think I started doing that before we were ordained, just because our church really embraces this freedom to sit anywhere. But I didn't have that growing up. You definitely sat never in the front. Those little special chairs. I don't know how many folks I got in the house that know what I'm talking about. Those little special chairs that you see in the front on the stage. I was always a kid like, oh, I want to sit in that one. You couldn't play around that. That was holy ground. Okay. And so, there was things I experienced that I didn't understand why. And then I start to understand why, and it hurt. Because I'm like, why is the most important person in the church don't have access to the people in his life? How come this person does not know what's going on in my life? I'm talking about pastors. Of course, that applies to the prophet, the evangelist, the teacher, and the apostle. But I'm just giving you my experience because I didn't know what all those were until later on. But I was like, how come? And yeah, it's just so much in this. I mean, even the capitalism, the fact of giving. No one in the Christian community wants to be broke. And I don't mean to make a blanket statement like that, but there's so much preaching about being prosperous and having money. And if you don't have money,
God wants you to.
And right, God, and if you don't have money, then there's a problem. What if I don't want money? What if I don't want God to enlarge my territory financially? What if I'm content, and I'm good working my job at Aurora Central and being faithful to my students? Oh, there's something wrong with you. Yep. There should be a level of expectation. The Lord wants you to have expectation. And when you grab expectation, God, see, you begin to step into that realm. Oh, come on, somebody.
Oh, no.
Make me find my preacher chords.
Back it up, brother. Back it
up. There's this pressure to go against contentment, even. Like, I could literally have contentment doing what I feel content. So, and you'll hear something real quick between TikTok or just anything that says you shouldn't be. You should have more. You should have money, and people respect you when you have more. That's how you know you have stepped into authority. All right, I said a lot, and so Joe, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to you because you've been waiting patiently, and I'm really interested to hear your perspective.
So there are so many great things said, and it's always interesting to listen to other people talk about the prosperity gospel and take a step back and think through where I was when. So I've told this story in a lot of different platforms. I don't know if I've ever told it here. Not long before I got saved, or not long after I got saved, I found the prosperity gospel because serial entrepreneur. It was literally like, oh, I could have all the things and it can be God flavored too. Awesome. No problem. And you guys hit the nail on the head that it is about that holy grind, and that like what you were talking about. If you were to come forward and say, I just want to be faithful over what I've got in front of me. Oh, you're thinking about God too small. Your God's too small. You don't have enough faith. And it's taking little snippets that are biblical and then just using them to springboard off in the wrong direction categorically. That being said, obviously we've talked about before, there's no problem with a Christian making a living.
Right.
There's no problem with a Christian making a good living. That's not the point. But when that becomes the thing that you are working towards, that better life, and that better life becomes all encompassing, well, what then? We have to stop and ask the question and look over our shoulder when we're trying to march forward. Take a look at ahead of you and behind you. What is this mode of thinking training you to think about different things? Think about things in the wide angle view. Because if you're saying that the grind, that the holy mission is for the better life and for you to make a certain amount of money and to better your life and all of that kind of stuff, what are you automatically by default saying about every single person who doesn't do that? In one foul swoop, you're making a character judgment on a whole group of people, whether you want to or not, whether you mean to or not. Every mode of thinking has a wide angle view, and that's what's so important when trying to unpack these topics. And it's weird, man. Like, Ant, you said it. Like, it's not so much. It's not just about when you don't have the right qualifications for people. How weird is it when for the wrong reasons you have the right qualifications for some people and they're looking at you like, oh, you did the right thing, and I'm like, oh man, you're giving me praise but you still don't get it, you know what I mean? Like that. It might not be the most, that might not be the most gracious way of saying that, and I admit that, but it's just this gross feeling sometimes. And I say that very heavily influenced by my experience as a business owner. Now, as a church planner, Tiara, I wanted to piggyback off of something that you said and just give a different dimension to what you had said. I've met with a lot of church planting groups over the years. The big name ones, the small name ones, international ones, and a lot of them train you. They have like some kind of educational course about picking church location. And there are how there's ripple effects to everything, right? How something culturally has an impact, and then you have to look at the ripple effects. Even if it's not right at the heart of the splash where the rock hit the water, it's still like 4 or 5 ripples back. A lot of them, that's kind of where they're at if you look at it in relation to the prosperity gospel, where it's not overtly prosperity teaching in the purest sense of the word, but it's still this idea of that's kind of attracting people that can pay, that make more, means that they can pay more into the coffers, and you're better off because you have heavy donors, and that will help you get to where you're needed. And and then that's where kind of the on-ramp is of God ordained and the holy people making more money and all of that nonsense. But it's also based into our model of evangelism. We need the people who make the more money because that's the grandest display of the favor of God. And if we have those people, then that's a sign that God is with us. And the whole singling out the top 10% of givers, I just found out about this from a person who attends a church on a different stream that I was a part of. Like, it's their church and they were defending it and they were saying it very normally. And if you could watch the journey that my face was going on throughout that entire stream. I was like, oh, this person's normatively talking about this as if there's not a problem in the world.
It's not a critique.
Giddy up. Yeah. This is fascinating.
Yeah, because it comes from this idea. By the way, chat, man, I hope you guys are about to jump in. Shots are being fired.
They're in there.
The heats are blazing. I do want to look at Garrity real quick. She said, I don't have a position tile in the church because of how people with the tiles act. I wish we could get a sound effect for that one because, yes, I agree. There you go. And so, yes, it is very, very unfortunate because I don't know. I'm even thinking about Martin Luther. I know, like, why we jump back there, because the whole fact that we were watching some men's group and kind of just wet my whistle of curiosity that I still have to kind of circle back and study more with Martin Luther and I think Pastor. I don't know what video it was that he was pulling from, but pretty much the whole capitalism in the church that people were using that as a sense of power. That if you gave this much money, then you could accept miracles to happen to heal. And so there are people that have also access to the Bible to actually read because they couldn't read, which in that itself was holding a position of power. And so they were giving because they felt it was protection. Oh, there was purgatory. So they wanted their loved ones to have a sense of salvation, a sense of freedom and salvation when they left here. So they were giving more. And you're probably, where are we going with this? Well, cause I think we've graduated some, but we haven't, like, even though I'm a Christian, I'm not Catholic because I was more dealing with Catholic and things like that. I feel like it's still in a weird vein that there's just expectation that if you give more, you have more. And if you give more, God rewards more. If you give less, God rewards less. And the things that are happening in your life, it's attached to money and what you make. And yeah, the whole 10% thing and people having access. Yeah, I've been hearing about that. And that's, I don't know, the word I use is cringe. It's just like when you hear these conversations, I'm like, oh, like that.
Yeah, it's so obvious.
Like it's so, but then you be waiting for someone to say something, and I swear, like Joe said, you get these lists of comments of people saying amen.
Yeah. That's the most fascinating part of it.
Yeah, it's normalized that this is
to me though, like we live in a capitalist society, so we live in a society that is driven by that, right? It's driven by the pursuit of profit. So like we said last week, and we continue to say, right, the church is not exempt from that. So it makes sense that, like, I guess the average person, especially in American churches, would feel that way. So I mean, like, from that standard, if you're not actually engaging with what the Bible says about our relationship with money, I can see how you would stay there. But it's just like, dang, how much are we not teaching just because we come in with this this belief already? Like, how much does it already filter what we're even able to read in the Bible and how to interpret the Bible, because we already have that.
Right.
And I also just want to open it up some more too, right? Because I think, yeah, it explicitly is about your income in terms of like how much money you make. But I think the other thing that people forget is also tied to like class and income level is like your assets, right? Like, how many cars do you have?
Right.
Do you own a house or are you a renter?
Oh, man.
When you own or rent, like, where are you located too, right? Like, all of these different things also become indicators of status, right? Like, if you own your own house, you're married, all this stuff, then people say you got it together, right? But if you don't, if you're going from place to place, if you're staying in somebody else's house, then people judge you based on that. And I think that also comes up with how we see a church too, right? Like, oftentimes if we are going to a church that like uses a school as its facilities, or is in a home instead of having its own building, or its building is in like a small little shopping center or whatever, people make assumptions based on what this church can do for them, based on the fact that this church is out of somebody's house or out of a school. So like, it even overlaps into that different way, like assets and things like that, not just how much we make. So like, even though that is also a big part of it, I think that like too, it's like, oh, well, I'm going to cater this conversation to middle-class families who own. And we can even get into that too, because most people actually like don't actually identify with the class that they are technically.
Right.
Like the middle technically, if you're a middle income family, right, that means you would be between 50,000 a year to 150,000 a year,
Right.
like that annual salary. So like, most people like
low middle class.
Right. And yes, right. Like, a lot of people actually don't have any kind of awareness of what their actual class status is. So they'll either overestimate or underestimate. And so that stops them from actually identifying, oh, that this is excluding me. Right. Like, yeah.
Can I circle back to
yes
comment? that I don't
Yes.
want to have a position or title in the church because of how the people with titles act. I think that's an interesting statement, and I'm big on not allowing someone else to control how I do what God calls me to do. Because we can throw the titles out, right? But the work still has to be done, right?
Right.
So
Like that.
even if you got rid of the title, you don't want that to hinder what God is calling you to do,
Mm.
because sometimes people won't step forward for this same reason. Well, because people who do that, they are this way or they are that way, instead of understanding, well, God is calling me to do that. Maybe I'm the change that I want to see, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I'm the individual who is going to shift the mindset in the community or in the circle or in the environment that I'm in, because
Yeah.
words carry a lot of meanings, and a lot of times people are saying things and it registers differently to the people in the room. One word can register. We got four people on here,
Oh
four
yeah.
different ways,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
To everybody on the panel. Somebody say pastor, and that could mean four different things. Somebody say prophet, that could mean four different things. And so learning how to get to a place where, well, is this biblical? Right?
Yep.
Because somebody told me that the other day, and I was like, well, what do you do with you know, Paul going out and ordaining these people to be these positions, and they kind of struggle with that. And it was like, well, yeah, I don't think he meant it like that. It was like, well, how did he mean it?
Hmm.
Well, why did he? And I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, why aren't we functioning the way the Bible says to function instead of throwing away things because someone does it wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk
That's
about. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's and that's it's a lot easier to throw things out because we have a misunderstanding of them than it is to come under common understanding that's biblically based and all of that, because that requires work, investigation, all of those kinds of things. And I mean, I get it. That's part of the reason why with my story you hear two chapters, two starting points to the pastorate, me operating within a house church capacity, off the grid, not working with other pastors, anything else like that, and then me stepping more fully into the role of pastor because I saw how other pastors worked. I saw how other churches worked, and I was operating out of a place of hurt, and so I didn't want anything to do with that world. I very specifically stayed away from
Mm.
that world. But like Ant said, and like I saw in my context, work still needed to be done. If I walked away from the work, nobody was there to step in the gap and do the work. And so you still have to do that work even if there's complications, I guess, centering around a position or a title or things like that. But it is unfortunate that that's something that we do have to wrestle with when considering things like positions and titles and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And there's such a pressure with that, right? Because me and you are young pastors, not to say it that way, but we are.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because a lot of people even can base our maturity based off of just age alone,
Yep.
and not it. Then you get into how you dress. Like, I think one of the funniest thing that happens to me when I go to work is when someone finds out I'm a pastor, you know, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're a pastor," you know. And part of me is like, well, should I take that offensively? Am I acting reckless at work? Which at work, I'm pretty, I try to act on my best behavior. I'm not acting foolish or anything like that, But I just the thing that comes with it is like, oh yeah, so you like a pope or something? Do you,
Yeah.
how come you're not wearing a suit today? Do you wear suits every Sunday?
Right.
Like, no, the way you see me at work is pretty much how I am at church. This the same individual. Um, and it's just interesting that we even base that off of what a pastor looks like or someone who has a leadership role in the church, that
Yep.
dressing and age is always funny night and day in between me and Ant, of when people hear things, they're like, oh, you're what does it happen to him, like, you're a pastor? And they're like, well, I guess that it's funny, is I was like, I guess that kind of makes sense. hearing him speak. But there's even this look based off of size and based off of again what people perceive what a pastor should be. Um, I want to circle back to something that I don't know if it was you or Tara, Joe. One of you two said it. I want to go say it was Tara, where we talked about the location and how a church looks. A little bit of vulnerability town. Before I get that, I do want to read this comment. She says, "I hear you." Gary, she says, "I hear you, and I am the change I want to see." That's what I like to see. That
Yeah.
to me, that's freedom. And I want to say also, I relate to you before I get into the point I'm about to make. Is I relate to that. 'Cause I had the same thoughts as well. Um, for years, and didn't want to be a pastor because of how I was treated by pastors. And man, God has done such a healing work in my life around that I can't even begin to express gratitude. Because starting off with for my screen, the person to my left, God was redefining what that even looks like as a pastor, because I could sit with him and talk with him. And then there's also, I want to call a slight rebellion to challenging the norm, where I was like, well, I'm not going to be like that, because I'm going to do the work of God. And whatever God wants to call me, he calls me. And so when God said pastor, I'm like, well, I'm just going to do the work of God. And I'm not going to be like what I saw growing up. So that way people don't never feel that around me. And I was a blessing to have that, because that was at the same time when I made that such a I will go ahead and say it was a vow. I had someone doing that in my life, that they were being an actual pastor. They were checking on me. We were talking. I was learning, teaching. When stuff went wrong, they were there comforting. Because see, the role of pastor is so complex, and I don't want to take a tangent on that. But the things I saw growing up are definitely not the things that I am. And I'm not trying to say that to say I'm better in any sense.
Right.
But when you think about a pastor, they are the epiphany of what a shepherd is. They comfort, they support, they're in there with you, they walk with you, they cry with you, they defend, they protect. And I witness all those things, and I do all those things. And so, yeah, I just want to let you know. But circling back to what I was saying about the location, I worked with a company now. I'm going to respect, even though I really feel like taking shots, because this company's make shots towards me, and I'll just go ahead and put it that way. But I'll go ahead and be the person that don't sling mud.
Evil for evil.
Right, I ain't gonna do that. But I will say, I worked with a company that was a Christian company, and it was a powerful experience dealing with my kids. I can't begin to express the work of God and the relationships I built in that year. But obviously, I was connected to a team, I'll put it that way, that had a big church. And one of the things in the role that we had as I was a teacher mentor, I put it that way. I was a person who was responsible for mentoring my kids, and I was also a teacher in class. But the mentoring portion is where I did a lot of the work of God, Christian aspects, and things like that. But there's always like a big church that we would go to do our youth nights. And the way was encouraged is that we should encourage our kids to be connected to our life, and for our team and each other to be connected to one another, in that sense of fellowshipping at different churches, in a sense, because we spent such a long time with each other. Because there was a season in my life where I wasn't even at my church as much as I wanted to be, because I was doing this role in my life as a mentor. But for one, I'll start with a personal experience. The personal experience was I always felt ashamed to invite kids to my church because they were going to this big church.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about that, I was like, oh, I might have to get in the vulnerable box team bit. It was like this shame that I can't invite them to my church on 13th and Chambers because they're going to this big church that has the appeal, the look. And I think I struggled with that for like months. And it's good to always have friends who kind of encourage you to step out of that place of being uncomfortable and to challenge that. So I went at work, and I always am talking to my lovely people here on the screen today. I'm always having them challenge my process, right? But then when I got the courage to speak up about it, It was met with some weird. Now I think about it, backlash. It was like, well, nah, we already got this man. But you said you needed a place. I remember there's times we needed places because the place that we would go wasn't always available. So the church we would go wasn't always available. Well, we need a place. Well, my church is willing to give that space if you need it. Yeah, we'll think about it. I'm like, what are we thinking about? You say we don't have a spot, but the individuals knew what my church looked like. And yeah, as you were talking to her, that hurt the more I thought about it. 'Cause I think it hurt back then, but I just, again, like a lot of times I find out in life, you can't define what something is because, like you were even talking about just the role of classism between how much you make. You don't have the information, the knowledge to identify what's happening to you until you. And I was like, that was crazy. This person isolated me based off of what my environment looked at, not based off of what my environment gave, because they work with me, so they know when I speak, it's sound. They know the individuals I'm linked to, and it's sound. And it was just an interesting discovery to deal with. And yeah, that happens a lot. It's just that, and I want to call it the small church versus the mega churches, but it kind of has that big feel that people, when they think about church, they think about what looks good, what's big, and what's popping. Not, oh, this isn't a house. Wait, this is on the corner somewhere in a sketchy neighborhood. What, that must not be good. And it's like we're so limited, and we isolate from things that could be great. And like I said, there's no shots towards big churches, because there's some churches I know that are big, that are sound. So let me go ahead and clarify right now. I'm not making shots, but there is this slight, I don't want to call it prejudice, but this slight, it is okay. I was just making sure. Yeah, that the one that doesn't look so good, that's smaller, is not as great as one that's bigger. And that, Pastor, I have to shout him out here on the screen, because I felt that on I won't say it's a small level because I don't want to dismiss it, but I can't imagine feeling that on a sense of where you're
right. Your name is the church.
yeah, right. You follow where I was going with that, and I know that's how you would not look at it that way, but that unfortunately that's how people categorize things, and so yeah, they look at that and they look at, and it's an ugly judgment. That's what I'm saying, and I'm saying that I feel that with you. And I'm like, that sucks that people actually do that. I was ignorant to that. I was shocked. I was like, people don't do that. People don't judge people off of what things look like and how small things look. And they do. And it it was just like a real rude awakening. Okay, so I'm sorry I said a lot.
There's really good stuff there, because you're talking about one of the core reasons why people look down on the house church model is because you're meeting in homes. That's not the real thing. You're not going to a building or anything else like that. And that scales. That's just a different flavor of the same concept when you're just purely talking about the church building side of it, and comparing church buildings to church buildings and all of that. And but there's one thing, just an interesting note, that if you're going to unpack it from the church size perspective, in a post 2020 America, the average church is between like 50 and 60. It's not very big. Anything above 60 now at this point is considered a big church. So while the illusion, or I should say the delusions of grandeur that some churches will have, and this model of striving to look like this sort of way or this sort of model as a church, even if you're not holding that right out in front, that we aspire to have a big building with a big, all of this kind of stuff and big ornate this and that and the other, but your ideals are still pointed in a very particular direction, and all of that. We put that in conjunction with the average size of what a congregation will look like and where there's this sharp line between what's considered a big church, what's considered a large church, and what's considered a megachurch. Because megachurches are becoming fewer and fewer when put in the actual paradigm of what is considered at a grand scale each one of the categories.
Yeah, but I feel like that, and that's a good point to make, because that is not reflected in our media, right?
Yeah.
It's not, right? Like, that's not the narrative that's being pushed.
Right.
Right. Even in like non or in secular kind of takes on the church, right? Like, what was that one that just came out? Honk for Jesus, and the other one, the praise something with the Bailey sister.
Oh yeah.
Praise this, right? Like, their picture of church is basically the ones that you see on TikTok, right? The ones that you see blowing up, these mega churches, right? And so it does, like, we see that there's a greater kind of division happening, right? Of like, oh, it makes it so that you're either a nobody church, right? A nobody small church on the corner, or you are a somebody church where we know who you are and what your pastor is, right? And it's the same kind of division that you have along socioeconomic status, right? Where like the haves are like all the way over here, right? And they're overrepresented, right? And the have-nots are either not represented or they're represented in an unfavorable light, right? And so like it's the same kind of dynamic. I think another area that it comes up a lot in is like, for me, I'm amused about it's Christian rap, man.
Oh man.
Like
the
hustle, the grind, like the amount of times that I feel like Christian rap is just not even really about getting you to like think about God, but more about professing this hustle culture, just with the God label. It's just crazy. But I think that like all of this goes together in the way that like we are, like I said, in a capitalist society, and so that's a part of it. What? The other thing that kind of I think that Anthony, your story brings up, right, is this idea of like competition. Right. I think that people forget, like a lot of people can remember that capitalism is about profit, right? That it's about kind of self-interest and maybe even property. But like competition is also essential to like creating the drive for profit, right? And so that comes up in the church too, right? Everything becomes about, oh, like what does my church have to offer? How do we make ourselves marketable, right? Like who are we marketing towards, right? These kinds of different questions that you're like, okay, but like, shouldn't you just be where you are? You know what I mean? And like serving whoever is here. And no, like for a lot of people, it is becoming this intentional, like, oh no, we need to figure out how we're going to brand because we're going to brand to this specific demographic and in this way. And this is what we have to offer. And they teach people to do it even as like ministers, right? Everybody is trying to find their ministry, but really they're trying to find their business, right? Because they're like, oh, right, exactly. Their niche. Like, I'm in fitness, so I'm going to do a fitness ministry. But what you're really saying is you're doing a business, a traveling
God-flavored business.
Right, and you're just throwing God into it. Or hairdressers, right? Like I have this hairdresser that I've been going to recently, and she talks about that. Like she's like, oh, spiritual warfare on our hair. And so like it's her ministry.
No,
like,
she ain't playing because I got the same thing happening to me.
And so it's like actually a part of like, oh,
thing.
turn everything into a hustle, everything into, and that hustle in the church is reformatted as ministry. Like, oh, you need to have your ministry, you need to have your thing that you're doing. And you're like, but like, why wouldn't I just help out with whatever is already existing? Like, why am I trying to distinguish myself and monetize myself instead of actually impacting and serving in the church that's already present, right? And it's a part of that. It's a part of this idea of I got to hustle, I got to climb up the ladder for myself, right? And so, yeah, I think that that's another big one that comes up through your story, Anthony, right? Because by saying that this bigger church is where we want to be and this little church is not, right? It causes you to then be like, oh, well, what do I do? Right? Like, how do I become the space that people want to go to, right?
And oh man, first let me Gertie's comment. I agree. We should be serving the people here in the neighborhood we are. Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't overlook that. I'm gonna circle back to that because it's going to tie into what I was going to respond to Tierra. Yeah, I can't express the feeling I feel like I had to overwork because my church was smaller. So I felt like I had to be more charismatic with my kids to oversell. So when they got to my church,
Mm.
it was enough to keep them. I think, okay, I'm just gonna be real, you know.
You
I
don't have the
mean,
amenities,
right?
right?
Yeah.
I don't got the
Uh,
5 gaming stations in one
basketball
room
gym.
in the gym, so I have to oversell my personality, right? Um, for them to be invested, and then when they're invested, now I can make this transition, and I hate that feeling
You
because
know,
it was
TC,
competition. Go ahead.
TC, on a spiritual level, there's that too. There
Mm-hmm.
are people that will take certain directions as far as um, their theology. Like, okay, so this is a spirit filled church over here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is a Bible teaching church over here.
Yep.
Mm,
When we
Yep.
hear those terminologies, we think, oh, but it's really a niche, right?
mm,
Mm-hmm.
Really a
Yep.
way to distinguish. Come over here because we teach the Bible. No, come over here because we're full of the Spirit. Come
Mm,
over here because we do missions. Come over
mm,
here because
mm,
so again, there's this thought that because we do this, we are a certain class, we are a certain group, we are a certain this or that. And so if you do all of that, you teach the Bible and you believe in the Holy Spirit and you do missions, you don't set yourself apart,
yeah.
because you have to have something to hang your hat on so that somebody will come instead of, hey, we're just Christians. We're trying to live the Bible and we're trying to be faithful to what we understand about Scripture to the best of our ability. And so it's really interesting, that this classism, like you said, is integrated. It's incarnated. It's woven in or baked in to our existence. And even as a pastor, you're trying to overcome that because
Yeah.
people will take you in a certain way. You're like, well, I understand this group likes that, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
So do we go with that because more people like that, or do we just go with who we are and let the chips fall where they may? And that's the struggle that you fight, in, because you'll look down the street, like you said, TC, that this
mm,
mega church, well, they got this and they got that. That's why they're mega.
right.
right.
Yep.
That's why they're big. And to say, well, I'm not competing with them, people are like, well, what do you mean? Don't you
Yeah.
want to be them? It's almost like
Yeah.
it's insane
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
that we just want to serve the community that we're in,
Yeah.
plant other churches in communities, serve that community that we're in. And these churches may not be more than 50, 60. They may be just larger house churches. It's just a big house, with a
Right.
lot of
Right.
people in it versus trying to be a mega church. And so there's a lot of pressure, quietly.
Mm-hmm.
What they call it, what's the word? Not sinister, but
Mm.
uh, the uh,
Insidious.
insidious. There's my word. It's
Yeah.
insidious because it sneaks in
Yep.
over time and it begins to corrupt you. That's my word, insidious.
Man, if we're, I'm sorry, guaranteeing again, if we're not one accord in the small church, we're not going to be any good as a big church. And it's funny because I was deacon this, because I was like, that's the division. And that does make it insidious because I'm like, there's so many levels where as a church we're so divided, and I think this one is one of those sneaky ones because again, what is wrong with me just being a church, one to just drive in my community and serve that community? Why do I have to be TD Jakes big or whoever you want to compare it with in my community big to be successful? It's crazy because I'm like, if they're breaching their masses, amen. But let me reach my neighborhood, and
Yeah.
it still should be the same amen
Yeah.
because the gospel is being brought forth. But I think the unfortunate truth that I discover when we talk about this is what Tierra meant, because oh my god, y'all just shooting fire up in here. When the man of the church grabbed this idea from the world, I'm going to say it just like that, to brand oneself. Branding, and I'm going to say something probably scandalous. Branding is the worst thing that ever happened to the church.
He said the worst thing.
Yeah, because it's and you know, and I'll go ahead and say from my perspective. So I guess I'll buffer to blow a teeny
You
bit.
qualify it.
You know, but probably is what I've been dealing with since I've been in the world of Christendom. is that you got to be something. Period. You gotta be something. What is your ministry?
Yeah.
You know, you don't got ministry in your heart. No, I'm just content with serving and getting behind what my other peers in my church is doing. I'm fine with serving Sister Mary's outreach ministry that God's placed in her heart, and I'm cool with doing that. I don't need to do anything else. I'm fine with sitting with that person every day. I don't desire to have something. And if God gives me something, I guess that's fine. But there is this thing where you have to be great.
Yeah.
The be great module, that's what I call it. That I fight every day. I even press record on my YouTube videos. I wish I can give you a glimpse of the spiritual warfare that I had to fight. I am going to call it that.
Yeah.
Hitting record, doing a YouTube channel. The arguments and the lies I have to shut down constantly because it feels like, well, am I just doing my own thing? Because people have done such a number on me, and there's so many things that I'm constantly shutting down to not give into a certain, if you would, narrative. You know, because when I started my channel, that was the thought process. I have to be great. I have to have something for me. You know, and I just like how T called it a spade a spade. You know, what you're saying is you need your own business.
Yeah.
You need something to cut you out to fit somewhere, to get in, and we keep bringing up class to be in a certain class, because that was my thought process. If I get this, I get successful, I get monetized, I have more money. And it's in Jesus' name, amen, right? You know, and yeah, it's just like, say it out loud, it's like cringe, like, right? I'm just like cringing even saying this. This is places that God's brought me from. But you have a conversation with someone like that, and that's almost like fighting words. So you're telling me that God doesn't want me to be great? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying,
it's just saying, what does great mean, right? Like that's
the
biggest thing, right? It's like, what does it actually mean? Because to say that to be great means to achieve a specific lifestyle or a specific socioeconomic status is limiting, especially for God, right? Like, we know that, like, if God can raise the dead, why do you think him making you rich is what he wants? Like, right? Why would he be concerned with that? Like, I mean, it's just
because if you're looking at things monetarily and you're trying to compare like big items to like big items, then the natural path is to compare resurrection and a fat bank account.
Oh man,
you know what I mean? Like, that's
wow.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I got a sound effect. Yes. All right, I'm done. You guys have a good rest of your show. No, I'm playing. Can I ask a question based off of what you said, T? I want to pose a question to the group. So yes, part of this conversation about your role in the kingdom. If you're only listening, I hear the air quotes seriously, because I say that tongue in cheek, because that's the kind of thing that you hear when people give their elevator pitches on their program to teach you how to become a kingdom entrepreneur and all this kind of stuff.
Oh my God, he said it.
Wow.
So that aspect of it is absolutely part of the conversation. But
Yeah.
let's take a look for a second at within the small C church, right? What's the stereotypical on ramp? You come, you attend for a little while, and then they funnel you into a spot where you can serve. Okay. Now, do not, for the love of everything, hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying serving's bad, but have we applied this same model into how fast we're shoving somebody into a role within our churches because you got to be serving in order to be holy. You have to be a part of the team in order to be a part of it. Now, any of these things, we're not painting one size fits all on any of the things that we've brought up, because there are people who take these very concepts and think about them in a way that is biblically based, that is sound, all of those kinds of things. So I'm not trying to say churches all across the board do this sort of thing, but I don't think it's just a matter of external ministries. Right, like these more business centric ministries and things like that. I think these very same concepts that we are talking about can be found within our small church organizations, and that kind of mentality can happen subconsciously, all in the name of you've got to be doing, you've got to be doing, you've got to be doing. Thoughts, opinions?
I guess I'll jump right into that. Yes, I think there's a danger in it. First of all, let me say there is a danger to that aspect of thinking. I think what's hard a lot of times. Well, can I give you my two extremes that I witnessed as a pastor? I'm serious. It's literally these extremes. You got people who want to come in, they serve, and they just want to be cute. I'm sorry, he uses this word. They want to be great. They want to be known. They want to be something. They want to be a minister, not realizing they already are a minister anywhere that they go. But that's the when you say air quote, I like that. That's the air quote, right? So you got people with those extremes that you have to actually slow down a lot, in my experience, and teach them how to work with people. So first, that starts off with getting to know who they are. Like, who are you? I want to say not being cheeky, but like, who are you? Like, what do you like? What do you do? What do you not like? And you getting to know me, right? And so a lot of times, there's a sense of humility in that, to even talk about who you are, not so much what you want to do. And there's an other extreme where I think, Pastor, you highlighted this one earlier real quick, where people don't want to be anything. They just want to hide. And the same approach is made with them, getting to know them, and then encourage them to the Spirit of God to say, okay, well, this is something you should get involved in. Not in a sense as a sense of identity and worth, but in the sense of this is a skill set that we've understood by talking with each other that can actually help you benefit and grow closer to God, because now you are serving others. Because both take a humility that I've seen. For the person who wants to hide, it takes a humility to say that, well, God can use me, and I shouldn't be hiding. I actually should be going where God wants me to go and doing what God wants me to do. To the other person, there's a humility of, well, I have to redefine what greatness is. I have to redefine what my worth actually is based off of. Is it based off of just doing things, or is it based off my relationship with Christ? And my relationship with Christ leads me to serve others from a great intensity and love. And so I've seen both. And so, and again, I think this is probably my life privilege of being a part of a small church, is that we do get to grow relationships with people. So everyone who's in our church doing something, everyone knows them to some capacity, that they're not just some random person that you're like, where did you come from? Why are you up here leading praise and worship? They get to watch this gradual growth of knowing who the person is. I think our whole process that we do take biblically, even with our deacons, is our deacons that we have right now, that we actually just praise God that we ordain. I think they're about to push a year, probably pretty soon. I think it's going by fast. We ordained them. I think they're close. They've been a couple months now. I know that much. these are people who served our church for years, and even some of the newer ones who just came, they serve almost to a year, and getting to know them, and not just us as leadership, but the people around them. Like I don't think people understand. Like our church, they choose their deacons and elders because we're going off of what their experience is. And of course there's the leadership we're looking and we're seeing, but we're collective taking that from experience of everybody. And I don't know, I think that's just a powerful thing. And so I think that's how you want, I don't want to say a module because I don't want to like box it, but you would pray that's how people are approaching these situations. They're not just drawing people in the box, which I've seen the other extreme, which I've had people hurt because of that, where they just, I was just good at this and they put me in, they didn't even know me, and now they don't want to do ministry at all. I don't think we should do it that way. I think you should get to know anyone. But I do want to read this comment real quick, and then I want to hear everyone else because Joe, you asked a very powerful question. I was at the church for 2 weeks I was at church for 2 weeks in that.
In a row.
2 weeks in a row. I don't know why I saw in. This is why I have my glasses right now. 2 weeks in a row, and they approached me about being a youth leader. Can I be a member first? Girl, I feel you. I feel you. I feel that. I want to say I feel you. Yeah, that to me, I don't want to tread lightly. I'm gonna go ahead and say definitely not the way I would approach that. I might even say unacceptable. Yeah, because I agree with your like. Can you get to know me first?
Right.
You know, can I can I? I read this. I was just scared. Can I breathe? Like you just want me to be something? Can I breathe? Yeah, but that's the reality. And that's why I think Joe's asked this question: is that you are the epitome of what a reality looks like when people come into a church. God forbid you be eating talented. Then I better chill out because I gotta let everyone else talk. Okay, I don't know, just jump in. Who's gonna go?
I'll definitely jump in on that. And the comment actually really helps the preferences. Is that because number one, I think it can become a problem when serving is a program, right?
Yeah.
It's a program that you have. Okay, if you're here, you here, move you here, move you here, move you here, and we're putting an assembly line together.
It's all systematized.
It's all systematized, and it's just this is the way we do it. And I think that's a problem because you can mishandle people by doing that. Number two, I think it can become a problem when like Pastor TC was saying, is that you don't know a person, you're not giving them time to become comfortable and hear what God is saying to them. Let them see how they fit into the process, but you got holes that you need to fill. And that's what I think happened here with our comment is that, ooh, man, we got a hole that we need to fill. You could do it. That's not fair to the person. That's not fair to the people that they would even be serving, that I'm just going to, snatch the next. And then it may be a form of classism because maybe she came in and she looked the part. She looked like she had herself together. She spoke eloquently, and they were like, "Oh, you're a minister. We're going to put you." And so that right there might be classism. You might be putting her in there because she looks the part, and
Right.
it's not to disparage her looking the part, but when you plug somebody in because of that reason, and then I think number three, yeah, it could be a problem just because it's not really it's building the wrong mindset. I think that my worth, my value is in my ability to do something. That if I want to come and sit for 6 months and just receive the word and get healing and get to know the people around me and just, get used to my new environment, that something's wrong with that. You can't we can't let you do that. You got to get up and you got to move. And so a lot of times, as a pastor, I'm watching people and I'm getting to know them, and eventually they're like, um, what is this, love thy neighbor that you do? Oh, and then next thing you know, they find a way into that. I really have a love for kids. I notice your children's ministry. How do I get involved in that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that to me is natural. That to me is organic. That to me is the way it's supposed to be done. And I'll give you one example, and then I'll shut it down. My cousin, years ago, um, amazing singer, amazing singer. She came and joined our church, and about 3, maybe 4 months in, she actually asked me. She said, "Why haven't you asked me to get on the praise team?" I said, "Because I want you to be able to make that decision. I don't want to, well, it's my cousin, you can sing, I'm gonna plug you in." Right?
Right.
No, where do you, because maybe you don't want to sing here. Maybe you want to do youth ministry or young adult. You might want to do something different, you know, because that's where God is calling you. And she said to me, she said, "No, I do want to do it. And I appreciate you
Mm.
pushing that on me, because I was a little nervous that you would do that, but I should have known better, but I was a little nervous that you would do that." And she led our praise team for a couple of years, um, and it was awesome. But she did it at her own behest. She did it organically, naturally, moving into that process, rather than me saying, "Oh, you can sing. We about to blow up because we got this good singer coming," and all that kind of stuff. And I just feel like that's irresponsible, and that might be mishandling, God's people.
Yeah. So I've been
Mm.
thinking deeply about how to approach the question, because I feel like the answers so far have been very much from a church leadership perspective,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In the way is like, as a leader, right, you don't want to do anything that is like non-consensual, right? Like you want it
Yes.
to be something that the individual is interested in, and not something that they're voluntold to do. Right. And so I think that's an important part. But I think the other thing is like, as a member, as an individual coming in, though, I think that um, if your initial reaction to the idea of service, right, of like being able to serve, or being able to, or the suggestion that you should serve in some capacity in a church, is one of resistance, I think that, like, I would say that's equally problematic.
Mm.
Because I think, for one, right, it shows that you are viewing this content, the sermon, the church, what is being produced by the church, as a product that is to be consumed,
Mm.
right? Like, it's something you come and you sit and you receive, right? It's something that you buy through
Mm.
your tithe, right?
Mm.
And it's an experience that you're paying
Uh-oh.
into.
Mm.
Right.
So
Again.
that I feel like that mentality can lead to this not being a transformative experience, which the church is supposed to be a transformative experience, right?
Mm.
It's supposed to be something that altered your lifestyle, not something that you come in and you say, "I bought this experience. I'm going to watch the movie and then I'm going to go home," right? Like that kind of experience. So though I do get, like, obviously leadership should not be coming in telling people how to serve and like what area they should serve, right? But I do think that there should still be an expectation to be an active participant in the community. So I think that, like, it's important for us to see it that way, and as members to come in with an expectation of, like, I want to get involved, even if it's not to like serve or be like a leader or whatever, or something as simple as like, I can bring chips tomorrow. I don't know. Like, it doesn't have to actually be like, oh, I'm going to join the praise team or I'm going to do whatever. But I think that it needs to be that you're coming, you are invested in this, not just like kind of an absent goer or viewer. So I do think that that's worth considering. But I think the other thing is that I think that in general, like, this is a larger issue that we have as a result of, like I said, our capitalist system, is that because most of us live on waged labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think of our time in terms of money,
Mm.
right? Or it becomes a commodity, right? And so I think that is part of also the hesitance that people have in serving in the church, right? And so like when they hear come and do this, come and serve, they hear, oh, you want my labor, but I'm not going to be compensated.
Ooh.
Right. And so I think that us as members, then like the question becomes, how do I not do that? Because that's not necessarily what's being said, right? Like, how do I break away from this idea that everything that I do has to contribute to me monetarily? Right. And so like I'm an active person of being like, yes, I believe in helping using my skills, using my passions to do things, right? But people are always asking me, well, why don't you monetize? Why don't you have a podcast for this? You could do that. Or, oh my gosh, you're a poet. Why don't you publish? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Right? Oh, you can draw, you can make. Oh, you should be making money off of these kinds of things. Right? Because we're taught to think of ourselves in terms of like how we can produce economic value. And so when you come into that way and see, when you have that mentality and you come into a church, right? And someone asks you to serve, you're like, is there money? Is there something coming out of this? Like, what am I getting for this? Because these other things outside, I get something from serving. I get something from offering my time and my resources and skills. I don't know if I'm getting something from here. And so we look at that as exploitation, which to some extent it can be, like, depending on like the amount of work. That's why you do eventually have like salary workers and things like that. But like for the average person to go and help in Sunday school is not exploitation, right? It's not like telling you to uproot your job and do these things. So I think that like they the call to serve in a church, right?
Yeah.
We both sides have to address how our specific assumptions that we have kind of color the way we hear that call to serve, right? Like, do we hear it as something that is mandatory, right? And are we making it something that's mandatory because of a need as an organization? Or are we hearing it as exploited because of these assumptions about what you're supposed to do with your time and your skills? Like all of these different things, I think, come up when you're talking about this idea of how do we serve and what does it look like? And so for people that are coming in looking at service as like a rest, right? As like, oh, this is a hobby. This is something I'm not supposed to work in, right? It does create conflict because we don't see that in the Bible. We actually see that the church is working and moving. Like it is a collective entity.
Yeah. So, Ant, do you have a sound effect that ding, ding? No, I'm playing. I'm joking.
I was looking for it. I was looking for it. Like, where's the ding ding? I don't have that.
Okay, I have so much to say. So I want to start off by saying that part of what I'm going to say is likely baked into underneath the surface to what Tiara meant with what she said. I'm just going to hit it from the angle of very specifically highlighting it. So this isn't a juxtaposition that you weren't saying this, but there is some nuance that absolutely needs to be highlighted in what you said. I need to start off by saying that it is for the community that we are formed, and it is in the community that we are transformed. That's biblical, that's scientific, that's life. And it took me a long time to come to grips with that and to come to terms with that because, truth be told, guys, in the right circumstances, I don't necessarily like people. I'm just going to be honest about that. I have a hard time getting along with some people. Just the reality of it. But the truth is, yes, there is, you're at a face value when you state, if you are coming in and saying something like what the comment here says, you can't just sit here and not serve, right? Like you ask that question, can I not just hang out for a bit? Can I not just be a part of the body for a minute. Yes, you are not incorrect that there is a consumeristic perspective at play in that moment. Now, I'm going to say something spicy. Okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes people need to consume.
Mm.
Again, not saying what you're not, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Tiara. I'm just highlighting a nuance point. That's all. That for a season, to use that Christian cliche, sometimes people need to take in. People need to be. People need time to heal. People need time to consume. People need time to take all of that in, and then you can start the concept of, okay, so I hear everybody talking about loving thy neighbor and serving the community and all of that kind of stuff. What does that actually look like biblically? That means that you can serve, if you look at it biblically, you don't have to do a slagging thing with your church. You can do things independently within the community that you live in, and you are still fulfilling the biblical tenet of what it means to love your neighbor. It doesn't mean you have to take a role in the nursery, in the kids ministry, on the sound team, or any of those kinds of things. You can, awesome. If that's where your time and talents can be spent, awesome. No problem. But if we look at it from a point of what am I uniquely gifted to do and how can I utilize that to help other people? Do you know how to fix a car? Go help your neighbor who is hard up for getting an oil change. Do you know how to bake? Go bake somebody some cookies. You know what I mean? All of those kinds of things. Just love on people. We get to do that. That's something that we get to do as people. It doesn't look one size fits all. And when it becomes systematized, and when the highlight point of well, you can't be consumeristic becomes, well, you have to be a cog in the machine in this very specific way, that's where you've gone the bridge too far. And I think we sit at an interesting point as millennials, as the three of the four of us being millennials, that we are experiencing the duality of gig economy and this whole idea of, in order to be a good millennial, you've got to monetize something that you have as a hobby.
Mhm.
That's just the reality. And still being a generation who, shout out to Andrew, and I'm throwing this in there very specifically for him, we've been subject to Cold War theology for our entire lives. So is Ant's generation, so is the generation before that. It's not new, but we are still a part of this world. And now at this point, our generation, we are the ones who are now old enough to start doing things like taking C-level suite positions at companies, or running our own business, or being the labor force, or being that 30-something workhorse part of the workforce. That now we have this, now we can monetize and have whatever we want, and there's all these different ways to monetize and all of that kind of stuff. And in order to do and be, you've got to be doing, and you've got to be hustling, and that's the American dream.
Mm.
That in the midst of all of that, it becomes really easy to lose people, and to turn people into commodities. Now, I have to say, because I'm literally stepping out of a context where I've watched a group of guys who love God, love others, and are so dedicated to helping people learn the ways of Jesus and walk like him, but they are so stinking scared to ask people to get involved because they've seen this thing go backwards.
Yeah.
They've seen this thing go buck wild, and so they don't want to ask anybody to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've got the weight of the world on their shoulders as a team, and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. You speaking?
So it's there. The pendulum swings here. Like, there's all different vantage points of this thing, but when we break it down to, in order to be a real member of the team, you've got to be in the group of people that are serving within the confines of the four walls. That's where this becomes really problematic really quick. and doesn't give time for things like different manifestations of time and talent and gifts and all of those kinds of things, or acknowledgement for the people that, yes, they do need to be loved on. They just need to consume for a minute before they have the strength or the understanding to even begin to wrap their mind around biblically what it means to love your neighbor or to serve other people, and to be able to think of it in terms of something that you get to do. And we need to give time for any one of these nuance points, because that's how we actually bring people into a biblical understanding and a foundational concept of what it means to be of one accord, to be united, to not look at people in terms of differences or the different things that compartmentalize us as people. Oh, guys, I'll be the first one to admit, for anybody watching any one of these conversations, they're spicy, they're hot-blooded, all of those kinds of things. So any point along the way, you're going to find one of these things where one of us, we've been touched by this thing. This is something that's personal, and how we have a lot of opinions about it. So I'll be the first one to admit, this one, you're hearing a lot more from me, guys, because this is something that I watch, I've seen. You know, you said it an hour ago, Tiara, about marketing and all of that kind of stuff. I hate to burst anybody's bubble who doesn't think that this happens, but there are whole equations that you can plug geographic location into, median income, and all of that, and that will tell you exactly who you need to be marketing to and developing materials for.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll step down off the soapbox now.
No, man. You're good. There was so much in all that everyone said. Chad, I want to turn over to you. And I'm going to read Garrett's full comment first. You know, you did touch it, Joe. So I agree, it's definitely classism. I asked why me. They said because of how I was with my kids, and I was well spoken. I really should be a missionary. Okay, missionary. You can just, he said again, you can't just sit here. Oh, they said you can't just sit here and not serve. Oh man, they were very forward with their advances, weren't they?
So this is 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. You've been here too long, sitting here too long in our church.
This is 2 weeks.
That pew getting too warm. We need you to get to work. Come on, Gary, get together. Anyway, no, I don't think that is okay in any form. For some reason we already spoke on, it's not okay. They said they told me I should be a missionary. Go ahead. In 2 weeks.
Classism.
Oh, classism. Yeah, definitely. Joe, you said a lot. Terry, you said a lot. And you said a lot. Chat. I know you guys are commenting, but I want us to come to a place where we're able to, because man, I just feel like having this full perspective, because we talked about leadership perspective, and then we talked about I think Tara, not to characterize it, someone coming into the church. Yeah. You know, I feel like we hear from both angles. But if I had to add anything, and Chav, you want to add anything, you know, us coming together as a people, right, and who serve the Lord together. I just think, man, I gotta point out this one thing. You're talking about how we're, you know, I think you talk about capitalism, how we're driven by that my time, my money, right? Like that is a real thought process. Okay, people come in with that thought process that since I'm giving time, there should be some form of compensation of something. You know, it's not always monetary. It's be something. I need to be compensated. What do we? I probably should be asking that question, but I got to. But what do we do for an individual who might be struggling with that? What would you encourage them, for lack of better words, to do? Because it's not a. I'm gonna be a little advocate on this one. The thought process is based off of the society around them. And a lot of times, a lot of people don't understand what biblical serving is. And so they are equating to, especially working 9 to 5, right? Let's say you're working 9 to 5, and then you come to church and you do something like a children's ministry and you work with kids earlier, right? You're working with kids all day. I'm just gonna try to pay it that way, so that way you kind of track where I'm going. What do you do to encourage a person like that? How would you encourage their mindset? What conversations should be had? What conversations should not be had? And I know you touched some of these things a little bit earlier, but I just kind of want to hone in on that point because, yeah, that's a thing because that's why everyone wants to be something, is because they're thinking about going somewhere, and that's usually tied to my money and my time. So, real quick, what would you say to a person who's having that mindset that church is more of a consumerism for them? Like, yeah, I should be getting something out of this because I'm giving my time.
Yeah, so I think that like first to address and maybe it'll kind of connect them because I think that Joe's comment touches on this a bit in the sense of like if the example is someone who spends all week working with kids and then comes and then has to work with kids again on Sunday, right? I think that part of it is they feel like they never left the job, right?
Mm.
And that's where the kind of allowing a diversity of options to serve becomes important, right? Because like maybe you are tired of kids, and I think that that's where like Garrett's kind of example becomes a really important example for thinking through the way that serving cannot be based on like stereotypes or assumptions, right? It has to be something that an individual is interested in, right? Like I get it all of the time. People will be like, "Oh, you're smart, you're this, you're in grad school, you need to teach stuff." Teach it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But like for some people, if they're like can do teaching, but teaching is actually not something that they want to do or invested in, right? You're putting unnecessary work on them because you pigeonholed them into this niche, right? So again, like even that goes back to this idea of self-branding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that like that's part of it. So like I think on the one side, like we have to make sure that we're not limiting people and in what they're allowed to serve in, or saying that I basically basing what they can serve in based on their resume, because that then perpetuates the same idea that this is a job, right?
Yeah.
Like this is something that you're coming in to work for. So they would assume, obviously, I need to get compensated, right?
Right.
But I think the bigger thing, the bigger issue at hand or question with dealing with like whether you want to participate or whether you just want to consume is comes down to how you would envision like how you approach consumption, right?
Mm.
Because for me, and I was thinking about this when Joe was talking, right? There's a difference between receiving and consuming, right? When we talk about consumption, there is this idea of taking something and it being destroyed in the process, right? Like think about it, like when you consume something, when you eat something, right? There is actually like physical breaking of what it is that you're eating, right? It gets broken down, it gets destroyed, and what you need from it is extracted, right? So I think that like that is a different approach than saying, okay, I'm going to come in and learn to do,
That's
right? And so I think that like there is on the one hand, like we can try and kind of debate semantics or whatever, but I think the biggest difference is really the heart condition, right? Is that like if you come in and you say like in your heart, in your mind, like, this is not an option, like serving is not an option. I think that's the thing that when it becomes that I'm just coming to consume, right? I'm not coming to contribute. I'm not coming to return. I'm just coming to simply get what I need from this service or from this, right? And that might mean I need a babysitter for an hour or whatever. So I come to service so that my kids are with the babysitter. Or I might need to feel good for an hour, right? So I'm here at service to feel good. But the point is that you have already kind of set in your mind. I think that is different than saying that, okay, I'm actually coming to be engaged, right? Because to me, when you come in and you say that I'm engaged, right, I'm trying to get what is being taught, I'm trying to receive, right? It doesn't mean that you've closed the door to service. So I guess the difference is in the unwillingness, right? I think
Right.
there's a difference between an individual who comes in and says that I'm listening right now, I'm present right now, and not saying that I'm unwilling to serve ever at any point in time in my life.
Yeah, the hard
So
part.
the question to me, it's for me to that person would be, okay, right then, is this something that you're not ever going to do, or is this something that you're saying for now is not in the cards for you?
Mm,
And I think that's how I would move forward, because I think those are different things.
that's a good question, too.
Um,
I'm just gonna get this. Go ahead.
Oh, good.
I was going to get this comment from Patricia. She said, "People in the body should have a mindset to want to serve as though they serve Christ. Do something you desire, and the Lord laid on your heart."
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're kind of poking at here, is that, there should be this posture of
Yeah.
what's on your heart and where you want to serve. And then you also get this perspective of the heart posture. That's what I was calling it, is if I want to do anything, there should be conversations. Well, because sometimes it's not now. And then sometimes it's, well, I want to, period.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the divide happens, and where we have to have conversations based on the appropriate
But also, like Dad
conversations.
was saying earlier, it does tie into this idea, and I think Joe also said this as well, like this idea of like, you don't have to do to be valuable,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And so like I think that is the other important part, right? Is that like when you come in and you serve, right, it shouldn't be about like, I have to do this to prove my worth, or to prove that I am a capable member, or to prove to earn my place in this community, right? That's not what it's about, right? It's about, okay, this community has given so much to me, or has impacted so much in me, and it should overflow from that,
I like
right?
that.
And so those are very different kind of perspectives, because one is a workspace mentality. It says that if I don't have a position, if I don't have an organization I'm serving in, if I don't have something that I'm contributing to, it doesn't even have to be an explicit title, but it's the same kind of principle, right? That if you don't have a title, if you don't have something you're doing, then you don't have value. And that's the same kind of thing that we're like pushing up against, right? Is that like, it's not about that. You have intrinsic value outside of what you do. And so, right, it's, though that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do something, but that you're not doing it to earn your worth.
Yeah, I think there's something to be considered, that a person may come in with the mentality that that's not what I'm here for, right? And I think there has to be room for that too, because you know it has to be inspired, by God, what it is that they're going to contribute to the community or not, right? Um, and because first they have to view it as their community, right? They have to view it as, this is a place where this group of people, I'm connected to them in a way, and I want to be on mission with them, right? Um, versus, coming in and kind of not knowing anything about that. Like you said, I'm serving in my, at the local high school, or I'm serving, I have my own nonprofit, I do this, I do that. These things shouldn't be, disparaged, because they're doing that. But as they come in, they need that time to, I guess, transition. I'll use the example of my cousin with the singing. Like, she sings everywhere. She's always singing. She's the, keynote singer at this and that. And we have her sitting in our church. You know, why aren't you pushing her to get up here and sing? Well, because I think that has to be something birthed in her, by God. Like Patricia was saying, that, people in the body should have the mindset to want to serve as though they're serving Christ. Because if I feel like I'm serving the church, there's going to be a point where that's not sufficient. That's not sufficient to keep me going, right? Because anytime you do anything just for people, people can let you down, y'all. People can make you not want to do anything,
People
right?
do.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
they
if you're
do.
doing it unto the Lord, that whether I was doing it here, there, or anywhere, I'm doing it unto the Lord, I think that's more powerful. I think that's more sustainable. I think that's something, whether you're at this church or not at this church, or living in this city or not in this city, you're going to do, because this is something that, as you know, that was laid on your heart to do for the Lord. If the community then benefits from it because you're in it, then that's the way it's supposed to be, because every member matters. You know, that each person contributes in the way that they can, the way that they're inspired to, and that's what makes it powerful, and that's what makes it sustainable. When it's not that, when it's any type of forced labor or you know, and it's hard. It is so hard. And again, I'm talking about this from the leadership perspective. It is so hard to um, create an atmosphere where it doesn't seem like there's a demand. It seems like anything you say as a leader, anything that you know, emphasize, oh, now there's this pressure to people to do it. Even when you say no pressure, there's still pressure, right? You know, even when you say we're not, you know, you don't have to do this, it still feels like I have to do this. And if I'm not doing this, there's some type of issue, right? And I can be suffering, you know, in silence, not knowing that at the end of the day, like, no, progress, grow into this. Let God show you where you fit in. Don't feel like you have to get up and do this right now, right here, for this reason or that reason. And that's a struggle.
I'm gonna pick up to answer your question, T. I'm gonna pick up the conversation at a little bit different of a point than these two said, but same core concept. Um, Even if I'm working with somebody who has a strict distaste for serving, you still, for me, it's about asking questions. Where'd that come from? What do you what are your thoughts on this? What is this? What is that? And just not with the idea of, oh, okay, now I have more of the information, so I know which angle to attack this from. Because we may have one conversation and then 9 months later, 18 months later, have another conversation. There's got to be time. You've got to give time for anything that gets drummed up to be drummed up undisputably by Holy Spirit. And that doesn't come on a timetable. That doesn't come in a very specific way, because a person may be a part of your church congregation for 3 years. And then suddenly they know that their local spot always needs, their local homeless shelter always needs people to be able to make dishes. And that's how, and they can make bulk dishes, and they know how to do that on the cheap and whatever. And so they do that. And that's how they serve. Well, they're still serving. They're still loving their neighbor. They're still serving their community. The thesis statement's still being fulfilled, even if it does not directly impact the church itself. And for me, this is where that house church part of me comes out, because if you talk to house church leaders, house church pastors, people who are long-time attenders, they will tell you that one of the very biggest things that you need to try to avoid when establishing something is a bond of bitterness. Because a lot of people who come to the house church come there because they come there because they've been de-churched in some way, shape, or form, or they've been hurt by the church, or they're rejecting the standard model for the church. Not everybody, But a lot of people come to the house church because they're looking for an alternative to Sunday morning. And so for me, I've experienced a lot of people who have come through the door that says, nope, I've seen how this goes. I'm done. I'm not going to serve. I'm here to worship God. That's it. I'm not supposed, like, this is not supposed to look like this, that, or the other. So I've had a lot of those people who have been 100% obstinate towards the idea of serving in any way, shape, or form, and have needed that time to be able to heal and come to know the heart and character and personhood of Jesus and the heart and character of God in order to understand, yo, this is what it means to love your neighbor. This is what it means to be loved by God. This is what it means to have this relationship. And generally speaking, in the midst of all of that, you're uncovering other deeper thematic points that then have a way of creating an environment where serving becomes this new and different thing, this thing that people think of differently, conceptualize differently, and things like that. But it all comes down to the relational component and being able to cultivate something in somebody. Some people may call that discipleship. Some people may just call that relationship, whatever. But this is where we walk alongside people. So that way, when we get to this topic, when this is where we're at, you start to then get to places like the body wanting to serve as though they are serving unto Christ, and to be able to do something because the Lord has laid it on their heart to do so.
That was good, Joe. Got some comments real quick. My heart always wants to serve on the praise team. Do not have a voice for it, but I can make a joyful noise. Then make a joyful noises. I mean, we encourage that, because seriously, I mean, most of the praise teams I grew up in, it really is about just committing to just sing, and you will discover that there's more capability in what you have. So yes, explore that. Make a joyful noise. You explore what God's put in your heart. So yes, looking forward to hear about that if you go on those endeavors. Patricia, the Lord will always send true laborers that have a heart to serve in the community or in the church that know how to communicate. Absolutely, He will. He will send, and that's what we've been saying. He will provide. And yes, I totally agree. There are people who have a willing heart, ready to serve. We're getting ready to land this plane, but if you could, I want you to go ahead and leave some closing remarks, some takeaways. That's how I usually do these streams. Some takeaways that you took with you today. Any value? There was a lot of value poured out on this stream. Personally, I believe there's a lot that we covered in a matter of 2 hours, and I want to know what you're taking with you. About classism in the church, some things that we can overcome, some things that we might need to pray about more, some things we might actually need to address, as we have said in this stream. I wanted to hear about it. I will turn it over to the panel as well for any closing remarks, if you have any. If not, it's okay. Just want to turn it over to you guys as well, see if you guys have any closing remarks.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted. Like, it's like pouring rain right now.
Yeah.
Like, we've had a couple of storms on and off here in LA, but like it's been like drizzle, and it just drizzles all day. So I don't consider it really a storm. But like, it's actually pouring right now. Like that North Carolina rain is coming down. Sorry, but
no, you're fine.
I feel like, yes, for me, one of the biggest takeaways in this conversation, well, I guess I have two, because I have one thing that I want to reaffirm for those that maybe weren't on at the beginning, but are on now, because I feel like we didn't actually address it as much as I would have liked to, is the like interpersonal side of classism in the church, right? The idea of like not sitting by certain people because they stink or because of whatever. So I do want to like reiterate that, like, we want to make sure that churches are places where all are welcome, right? Like
Mm.
part of the reason that Jesus didn't actually go into the synagogues and all of that often, right? Like we see him outside in action is because he was going to people that were not welcome,
Right.
right? To outcasts and to misfits. And so I think that we have to remember that even as we institutionalize the Christian church, that we don't lose that impetus, right? That we don't suddenly forget that everybody matters, right? That everybody is valuable. Um, and so to make room and make space to work out those kinds of kinks, right? Like to deal with that, and to not just say, oh, not just avoid the topic or censor the person or avoid the person, but to actually like address these kinds of assumptions head on, because they are a part of a larger thing. So I do want to like re-emphasize that because I don't think we talked as much about that. Even though that too is a part of like dealing with classism in the church. Um, and then the other thing from our conversation that we did have that I think that I will take away and I encourage others to is to realize that work is not a dirty word, right? Like it's work, service. These are not bad words inherently, right? Because of capitalism, right? We know we've like kind of assumed that work is something that is hard and excruciating, and that's why we need to be compensated, right? But we also look at some work as more valuable or more like worth more than others, right? That's why like we have titles, right? Because it comes from this idea that what the pastor does is more important than what the greeter does, right? And that's not true, right?
Right.
Work is work, service is service, right? They are all equally meaningful. And even though they can be difficult, it doesn't necessarily mean they're to be avoided, right? So I think that that's the kind of big takeaway is like, let's not judge each other based on the type of work that we do, whether we don't do enough according to some people, or we do too much, or we should do more, right? Like, let's not do that. Let's not get caught up in that detrimental comparison, right? Instead, let's meet people where they are, right? And what they're capable of in a way that allows them to still be human, right? And doesn't define them based on what they contribute, whether that gives money or not. I think that's my big takeaway for as far as thinking about classism, capitalism, and the church.
There's some good stuff, T. Two powerful takeaways. Got some comments coming in while we were talking. People will really have a true heart to serve and ask God where I should serve, and not have a grudging heart in His love in the church. I'm glad. This is for Garrett. I'm glad not only one. Wait, sorry, y'all. I'm glad I'm not the only one that has experienced classism, and there are leaders, you all, that have desire to change that. Yes, yes, yes. That is the whole nature of these conversations, is to bring about change and to grow. Patricia again, wow, so true. Let's work. Let's work as a body of Christ in love on people.
Yes.
Yes, because that's when we're being who God called us to be as a church. So yeah, powerful points. Tiara, I really like how you brought home that church is a place where everyone should feel welcomed. Like that was a very powerful point. Any more closing points? Because man, that we cover a lot. Look at you two
Yeah.
gentlemen.
I think my biggest takeaway is when you're looking at something like classism, and you look at how in these past 2 hours we went wide without the ability to really go deep in any particular area, because this is such a large and encompassing topic that in order to check as many of the boxes as you can when looking at classism, you've got to look at the concept of the imago Dei, the image bearer, and viewing somebody first and foremost as an image bearer, every single other thing second. Not unimportant, not looking at it, but first and foremost as an image bearer levels the field in a lot of regards. And when you operate there from a Christian perspective, then there's a commonality and a connective tissue that comes right out to the surface that supersedes any of the other dividing points that we would put up, or any of the boxes that we want to put people into based off of this thing or that thing, or this perceived notion or that perceived notion. And then as you go forward to have conversations about things like service, having conversations about things like systems and organizations and how we do things and all of that kind of stuff, then you're operating out of a commonality, out of a shared language base that then will help you to move forward in unity and not be so focused and so hell-bent on it being uniformity.
Mhm.
And I guess I'll just end with the two things that I think drive me, to love God and then to love your neighbor. You know, that everything I do is birthed in my relationship with God, and then it overflows into blessing my neighbor. Um, and if we're allowing ourselves to do that, then things won't feel forced or regimented or grudging, right? Because I'm doing this out of a desire to invite people into this relationship with God that I'm enjoying and that I am overwhelmed by, and I want to share that. And so when I see somebody in need, I want to be a blessing, not because it's what I have to do or it's what people expect me to do. It's a natural outworking of my relationship with God. Um, Not something that is systematized, as you were saying, Joe, or programmed or uh, of compulsion. So I think that's my biggest thing is actually asking and answering that question. What does it mean to love God with all and then love your neighbor as yourself?
Guys, this has been a amazing stream. Remember, there's so much information given out. Highly recommend that you watch the stream again. Share it with a friend. Just because the stream is about to end doesn't mean you cannot share it with a friend. Okay, because it helps out. We want to get this information out. We want to educate people as much as possible in our church, in our world, about not only the powerful things that God is doing, but the things that we're learning and the barriers that I believe by faith that God wants to tear down. Okay.
This one's for everybody.
I love it.
Baksu.
So, well, blessing, you guys are doing a great work. Amen. And we hope to see you again as well, Patricia. Make sure you share this. We're always live here every Saturday, 7:30 MST my time. And Joe, what time is it for you over there? For your
9:30
audience?
Eastern.
9:30 Eastern.
9:30 Eastern. So, guys, we're always here for an episode of Let It Rip. And man, you never know what you're going to get. Now, I always do this because I want to turn over to. I just love this quote that you use. So we'll turn over to Joe as he lands this beautiful plane.
Guys, thank you all for joining us for another edition. Guys, until next week, I want you guys to remember two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. All right, peace, y'all.